power that had just been paid with the peace of an entire dynasty. After finishing the story, do you believe Princess Anne's solitary action in orchestrating the secret investigation was a wise decision to protect the monarchy? Or should she have trusted the palace's official security system from the very beginning? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it. Strategic card, played with a sole objective: to force William into an intensive care unit, thereby indefinitely delaying the Regency Handover ceremony and halting the upcoming comprehensive audit of the Duchy of Lancaster royal estate. Camilla the slightest trace of movement on the carpet before leaving the room in silence. The 24 hours that followed felt like a century to Anne. She sat in her private library pretending to flip through history books, but her mind was entirely fixed on the encrypted signal transmitted back to the hospital. Camilla snarled in bitterness, venomous words pouring out without restraint. She bitterly conceded that this accident was indeed a meticulously orchestrated scam of a dossier onto the desktop. And then Camilla's familiar voice rang out, fractured and stripped of its usual aristocratic composure. Across the sound waves, Anne could sense the Queen's utter panic and fury as she listened to a subordinate report that William had sustained only minor injuries and had already been discharged from back to her receiver. The turning point arrived the following afternoon when the recording device began transmitting live audio. At first, it was the rapid clicking of the high heels, the sharp slam. King Charles III looked up at Anne, his eyes no longer wearing the exhaustion of sickness, but replaced instead by a razor-sharp, resolute glare. The decision to act was firmly set in the king's mind: to protect William and uphold the dignity of the monarchy. There was no room for Iranian fury surging through the monarch's veins. Charles's breathing grew rapid, his chest heaving beneath his thin wool sweater. His gaze shifted from the recorder to the family photograph resting on the desk, where William was smiling radiantly. The instinct of the felt a sharp pang of sorrow. Yet she remained standing tall, maintaining her composure to remind him of his supreme responsibility as king. The initial shock gradually gave way to a head of the dynasty and the love for his eldest son, the sole legitimate heir, resurrected his spirit from the ruins of betrayal. He slowly switched off the device, and the room plunged once more into a terrifying silence. But this time, it was the silence before a great storm. During the final sliver of faith held by a husband and a father. Seeing her once grand brother seemingly collapse entirely before her eyes, Anne was terrified, the terror of someone who understood that if independent auditors intervened, the massive deficits and financial irregularities used to solidify her factions for years would be dragged into the light, stripping away all the power and prestige she had bartered her entire life. The royal crest lay undisturbed inside Princess Anne's coat pocket, as heavy as a time bomb. Her footsteps upon the stone steps leading up to King Charles III's private study at Windsor Castle carried a resolve mingled with heartache. In her capacity as a princess, serving the entire reign, a horrific secret capable of shaking and collapsing the public's trust in the British royal family forever. The recording device wrapped in a silk handkerchief embroidered with the royal to obtain. Every word, every gasp, full of greed and selfishness, from Camilla entered Anne's ears like heavy hammer blows, striking the foundations of the dynasty. The room seemed to turn freezing cold. Anne sat motionless in her chair, her eyes staring wide at the transceiver, displaying the digital audio waveforms. The evidence was clear, unassailable, and possessed destructive, explosive power. Within the hands of the seasoned princess now lay not just a recording tape, but the fate of a down. Nor would she report this to any security agency within the palace at this time. This battle she had to see through to the very end on her own, using her own lifelong mettle and reputation to unmask the mastermind, regardless of whether it might ignite the most horrific constitutional crisis in contemporary history. ultimate weapon, a confession or direct evidence from the masterminds themselves. That thought guided her toward a bold and dangerous decision unprecedented in her lifetime of serving the crown. Taking advantage of the period when Camilla departed the palace, suspicions or scattered pieces of technical documents were still not weighty enough to displace a dynasty, much less convince King Charles III of a cruel truth regarding his spouse. To confront a force holding the Queen's crown, Anne required an entire investigation, and the life of William, the future successor, would remain in jeopardy. Looking at the crude alterations in the maintenance log, Anne pressed her lips together, arriving at a decisive conclusion in her mind. She would not back. The silence of Buckingham Palace as night fell carried an invisible pressure, weighing heavily on every silent step of Princess Anne. Following the shocking discovery of the altered maintenance logbook, she understood that mere suspicion radiating from the men across from her only fanned the flames of resolve within the princess. She understood that she was walking a taut tightrope over an abyss. A single misstep, a minor leak of information, could suffocate the intention into an ordinary technical mishap. Anne's palms gripped the arms of the oak chair so tightly that her knuckles turned stark white. She felt a freezing chill run down her spine as she realized the sheer scale type of paper, possessing a completely different thickness and reflectance. The situation was now as clear as day. Someone had directly sabotaged the vehicle's mechanical system and subsequently wielded supreme authority to erase all traces from the archiving system in order to transmute an attempted assassination and sophistication of the force lurking in the palace shadows. The mastermind behind this did not merely want to eliminate William. They commanded a network of lackeys powerful enough to manipulate the crown's military logistics apparatus, an entity long deemed inviolable. The palpable fear. As the parchment pages were turned under the dim light, her keen eye instantly detected that the spine of the book bore signs of a slight slit, and the technical records for the day of the accident had been replaced with a ordered on frigid and the holder of the title of Hardest Working Royal. For decades, silently turned off the television screen. Her sharp eyes, reflecting the dim twilight, narrowed in deep contemplation. Her relationship with her brother Charles had always been built upon an from the military logistics force. The notion of a sudden brake failure on a smooth stretch of road for a vehicle of the highest standard was a direct insult to her intelligence. She stood up her fingers, tightening around her ebony walking stick, and walked absolute reverence for the monarchy and her protection of her nieces and nephews. Particularly William had always been a quiet, yet inviolable vow. Better than anyone, Anne understood the inner workings of the royal muse. It was a closed slowly toward the window overlooking the courtyard, now teeming with guards. Memories of the late Princess Diana's crash and the political intrigues lurking behind the velvet curtains served as a constant reminder to Anne that in the world of royal power, there was no room for coincidences. A system where vehicles serving the heir to the throne were not mere modes of transport, but mobile fortresses, subjected to rigorous technical inspections every 24 hours by top engineers. Regarding William's condition, alongside the communications office's uncharacteristic haste in clawing back all scene footage from independent media outlets. Determined to find answers herself, Anne began making probing phone calls under the guise of reviewing logistics for upcoming monarchical events. A sense of unease urged her to dive deeper, dissecting the smallest of details. She recalled the restless demeanor and evasive eyes of the royal physician during his televised interview. Yet instead of the customary prompt cooperation, she was met only with walls of silence and sugar-coated evasions wrapped in diplomatic jargon. The commander of the Royal Royalty Protection Command cited national security to deny access to the vehicle's digital logbook. Meanwhile, the head of logistics at Buckingham Palace had abruptly taken medical leave immediately following the night of the incident. This collective evasion and lack of transparency from individuals otherwise renowned private study at St. James's Palace. The desk lamp cast a harsh glare onto the cold, block-printed letters. But what consumed Anne's mind was not what was written on the paper, but rather the suggestive blanks left between the lines. A rising sense, each audio wave rang out with absolute clarity, carrying the fury, the cold confessions regarding the cancellation of the escort detail and the conspiracy to stage the car crash to force William into the hospital. Every sentence, the Duchy of Lancaster, where she had covertly profiteered to build her own faction, the king's face turned completely ashen, drained of all color. The aged hands pouring from the recorder felt like an invisible dagger stabbing straight into the man sitting in the armchair. King Charles's countenance transformed with every passing second of the tape. At first came bewilderment, then skepticism, and finally, when Camilla's voice mentioned her terror of the financial audit at the hands of King Charles III, gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that blue veins stood out in tangled webs, trembling uncontrollably. His entire life, he had weathered countless storms and public scrutiny to elevate Camilla to the position of queen, placing absolute trust in her and viewing her as his greatest emotional anchor during his days battling illness. This cruel truth was not merely a political conspiracy. It was the most horrific personal betrayal. Offshore accounts linked to shell companies established by Camilla's faction. The scale of the manipulation far exceeded anything Princess Anne had previously envisioned. Revealing a years-long profiteerishly cultivated was now merely a matter of time. The drama escalated further when the initial verification findings from the independent audit team were delivered that very afternoon. The anomalies did not stop at the budget cuts for William's escort detail. They exposed a network of subterranean transactions, opaque transfers, to a conspiracy aimed at undermining the economic foundations of the crown on the eve of the royal transition. As the financial investigation began to expand, its scope of control security surrounding Prince William was tightened to the absolute maximum. His escort vehicles were now completely replaced by mobile tactical units, and every travel itinerary of the heir was encrypted and altered by the hour. The British monarchy officially entered a highly volatile era, a tempestuous new chapter under the scrutiny of the global public. Standing by the window, looking down at the courtyard, where judicial police vehicles were beginning to roll through the palace gates, Princess Anne softly closed her eyes, acutely feeling the steep price of ambition and this extraordinary intervention flew directly in the face of the strict protection protocols mandated for the heir to the throne, an immutable principle. Anne stood rooted to the spot in the biting wind as every scattered puzzle piece from the past 2 days instantly shifted and locked ruthlessly into place, a line of family ties and allegiance. Despite the descent of night draping the royal gardens, Princess Anne did not allow herself to rest. The truth had to be unearthed that Camilla as queen understood better than anyone. The once vague suspicion had now found a concrete name to target. Camilla's face, with the placid smile she usually wore beside King Charles III, materialized in Anne's mind, but it was now tinged with a calculating and malicious hue. Anne clenched the paper in her fist, acutely feeling the weight of a palace conspiracy unfolding before her, where the thirst for power had crossed as Anne walked along the secluded pathway leading behind the Royal Mews maintenance sheds. Here, a young technician whom she had patronized years ago and who maintained absolute loyalty to her branch of the family, approached her under the pretext of checking the perimeter heating system. While pretending to lean down and adjust the pressure valves, the trembling young man slipped her a hastily photocopied internal dispatch order. As Anne's eyes scanned the handwritten lines, her heart skipped a beat. For their meticulous diligence felt like a bucket of cold water extinguishing Anne's last fragile hope of a pure accident, and confirming beyond doubt that an iron curtain was being lowered to conceal a horrific secret. The turning point of her suspicion arrived the following afternoon. This highly classified document revealed that the entire elite motorcycle escort scheduled to flank Prince William's limousine had been stood down a mere 3 hours before the vehicle departed Highgrove. The reason stated in the text was pre-audit budget optimization. But what made Anne's breath catch was the plump, arrogant signature of approval in the bottom corner, Queen Camilla. The small scrap of paper seemed to burn the palm of the seasoned princess. Could be distinctly heard. Without a single word of introduction, Anne acted slowly but decisively. She stepped forward, placing the digital voice recorder onto the mahogany desktop, right beside the royal privy seal. Her eyes lured, sitting at his desk, surrounded by stacks of state papers and long rows of treatment vials. The fading light of the day filtered through the stained glass window, casting a glow over the monarch's exhausted face, directly at her brother, gleaming with solemnity and a touch of profound compassion. As Anne's finger pressed the playback button, the space within the room was instantly torn apart by Camilla's voice. Crown. She understood she was doing the right thing to protect the future of the throne. Yet as a sister, she knew she was about to deal a fatal blow to the heart of her brother, who was being eroded day and night by severe illness. The oak door opened to reveal the frail silhouette of King Charles III, pale skin and trembling hands. Anne closed the door behind her, and a silence enveloped the room so profound that the king's heavy labored breathing was an obvious indicator. The suspicion in the seasoned princess's heart did not stop at the negligence of a few maintenance staff. It began to root itself deeper into a darker narrative, one where conspiracies were being nurtured within the very heart of the institution she had spent her life serving. Anne returned to her desk, flipping through the log of a closed traffic file, but the detonator for a total crisis of the crown. The darkness of the London night could not dispel the tension coiled inside Princess Anne. Told her that someone was deliberately staging a clumsy drama to conceal a far more sinister intent. The air around her seemed to grow freezing cold, marking the exact moment Princess Anne officially entered a covert war in the shadows. A war where the truth behind the accident of the heir to the throne would not simply be William's travel schedule, for the weak her lips pressed into a firm, resolute line. The official explanations from Buckingham only sharpened her intuition. The instinct of a woman who had weathered the innate highs and lows of this grand dynasty at such critical moments. For William to meet with an accident just on the eve of crucial hearings regarding the appointment of a prince regent alongside preparations for a massive royal financial audit was an all-too-wall made the space feel all the more desolate and tense. She stepped into the room, the distinctive scent of Camilla's lavender perfume still lingering in the air. Like a reminder of the room to attend a charity gala in the suburbs, a multi-hour event scheduled months in advance, Anne began to act. With the assistance of a loyal bodyguard from the Special Security Force who possessed a master key to the internal rooms, Anne approached the Queen's private office suite at Clarence House. The corridor leading to the room, Anne deftly attached a micro-digital recording device no larger than a button into a crevice of the wooden lining. When the red LED light on the device blinked once and then went completely dark, signaling the activation of the recording process, Anne finally breathed a sigh of relief, quickly erasing the room owner's powerful presence. Without wasting a single second, Anne moved toward the large mahogany desk. She bent down, reaching her hand beneath the hidden corner of the desk drawer, the position closest to where the secure telephone receiver was placed. With the precision of someone trained in survival and security skills since her youth, was dark, with only the faint, flickering light from antique sconces, casting shadows upon the portraits of ancestors looking down with grim solemnity. Anne's heart beat faster than usual. Every rustle of her long wool overcoat brushing against the had been quietly activated, paving the way for a historic transfer of power to a younger earthly successor. Bearing the expectations of an ancient institution upon his shoulders, Prince William began bloodline succession. It was a race against time where every signature and every glance from those involved was measured by the yardstick of loyalty and power. It was during these a monarch whose burdens of illness were visible in his liver-spotted skin and steady yet exhausted stride, the gaze of the entire United Kingdom locked onto Buckingham Palace. Every preparation for a refined iteration of Operation London Bridge within the royal family seemed desperately eager to keep hidden. Following the official announcement earlier that year regarding the worsening condition of King Charles III, and making frequent appearances at the highest legislative council meetings, preparing to take custody of the prestigious St. Edward's crown. This transition was no mere the sovereign's guard in stern uniforms, sealing off every exit and entry. A psychological crisis struck swiftly, suffocating a woman who had always prided herself on her ability to manipulate the office and the Metropolitan Police Service, authorizing the activation of a comprehensive, independent financial investigation into the Duchy of Lancaster royal estate. This decisive action by Charles left no room for the personal sentiments of a husband. It was the supreme self-defense reflex of a monarch aiming on her vanity table, struck like a bolt of lightning at the very peak of her ambition. All communication privileges were severed, and the loyal courtiers who had swarmed around her for years had vanished all at once, replaced by new detachments of the board. Camilla's emerald-ringed hands trembled as she attempted to flip through her personal dossiers, realizing that she had not only lost her courtly influence, but was also facing the imminent threat of criminal prosecution under the laws of the realm should the financial irregularities be verified. The collapse of the empire of power she had meticulously to safeguard the legitimacy and safety of the heir to the throne. On the other side of the palace, within her lavish bedroom suite at Clarence House, Camilla faced the brutal reality in absolute isolation. The internal notification from the Lord Chancellor's office resting through unassailable evidence. Exercising her supreme authority as a member of the Privy Council, she